Hi everybody and welcome to this tutorial. I'm going to show you how to make these really lovely dangle earrings. I'm going to talk you through the different ways to make ear wires and how to attach beads using wire to make very different unique designs. And once you've got the basic techniques, which are very simple, you'll be able to use your own beads, which you can order online or in beautiful bead shops all over the place. Or you could even dismantle old jewellery that you don't like wearing anymore and make a whole vast array of new creations. So for this, I've got a pair of check beads, this style of drop beads, and I've also got these discs, and I've got a few little rondelles as well that I'm going to use in these two different ways that give a really different finish. And I'm also using sterling silver wire, or these are actually silver plated. It's a little bit harder working in silver plated actually than sterling silver, but if you've got one of my kits you'll have lots of practice wires, so you'll be able to make mistakes if you need to, or make a whole load of other earrings too. So for the ear wires themselves I recommend 20 gauge, that's the thickness, and for the head pins and connectors I use 26 gauge or sometimes 24 gauge. And so I'm going to start by showing you how to make a pair of ear wires. Now, although these two do look quite different from each other, they're actually made in exactly the same way. So if I just move all this out of the way. So we'll start by getting our two ear wire, or at the moment just wires, together at the same time, and we're going to work them at the same time so that they come out exactly the same shape. It's 2 inches long. It's probably more than we need, so we'll need to trim it down at the end, but I'll just show you how to make this. So if you take your round nose pliers, by the way, you're going to need the usual jewellery pliers, round nose, you'll need some cutters, and you'll also need some flat or chain nose pliers, usually for tucking in ends and holding things steady. But the round nose ones are really important for the little loop at the end. So I am just going to turn it all the way around, both of them at the same time, to make a sort of little hook. Oops. So hopefully if I hold that, you'll be able to see them. And then what we need to do now is make the actual shape of the hook. Now, in order to do this, and in order to you have to kind of decide how wide you want it, and I use a pen or a pencil. Obviously I do have mandrels and trivets and things here, but if you don't at home, it's fine to use a pen or a pencil, it's exactly the same. My favourite is the Uniball because you can actually also use the lid to kind of keep it in the same position, not that that makes any difference, but it sort of feels like added security. And then I'm just going to bend the wire around the end, the side of the pen to make my ear wire shape. And then I'm going to remove it, and it's made. I've done it both at the same time so that they're matching, and you can see you've already got the majority of your ear wire done, but we're not quite finished. It's quite long at the back. I don't think it really needs to be that long, and you may find that it's a fine shape, so you might want to skip this step, but I'm just going to make it a little bit shorter by using my cutters, and I'm going to cut it down so that they don't fly up in my face. Sorry, you can't see that bit if I do it that way, but I've just cut them both again at the same time so that they're even, and then I'm going to use my flat nose pliers to just bend up the back. This is so when you're wearing the earrings, if it does work its way out of your ear, you've got a little kick as a sort of added security, to a last-ditch attempt to not fall out. So you know, sometimes your ear wire might come out, so that prevents that from happening. Now, so they're basically finished. However, the end of this, because we've just snipped it, it's very sharp. So if you've got one of my kits, I've included a little bit of sandpaper, and you just need to sand it down. You can use a file, such as a nail file, or you can use an emery board or sandpaper from your box or your toolbox. But if you just give it a little bit of a sand down, it'll just take any edge off. And when you're using sterling silver, it does come away more quickly than the copper. Silver plated has a copper core, and it's a little bit harder, but it does come up nice and smooth. So those are my ear wires, and that's, as you can see, I just maybe need to straighten them out a bit. There we are. So that will be the top of one of my pairs of earrings. And if you're thinking they're a bit too wide, just again hold them together. This metal, both the silver plated and the sterling silver, is malleable enough for you to be able to move it, but not so malleable that it completely bends out of shape. So I've just bent those a little bit so that they're a little bit longer and thinner. So there's our first pair of ear wires. I'll come back and make another pair later, but I think for now I'll continue with making this pair of drop earrings. So we now need to use the other size of wire, so we're using something thinner. We probably could get the thicker wire through the end of this bead, but I think it's much harder to work with when you come to finish it at the top, so it's better to use a thinner wire if you can. And I'll show you how to make the head pin that's going to hold it in place. You might have already seen this in one of my other videos, so it's exactly the same as making any other head pin. And so I'm going to fold over the end with my flat nose pliers and squeeze it. Oops, it doesn't want to stay in place. There, so I've just folded it around. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to fold it around again, so you could leave it like that if it fits. I'll just try and see if it does fit. You want it not to fall off the end, so it is big enough to hold it in place, but I'm going to go around again. Like you can see in the ones here, they've got a little bit of a spiral, so I'm going to go around another time to make a spiral. There we are. And you can, of course, if you want to, keep going round and round. So I might just go around one more time, or half a round, and then just kind of nip it round a bit so that it's pointing upwards. And now I can put my lovely bead on the wire. There we are. Just going to make sure it looks a bit there. So it's just sitting nicely on there. And for this design, I put another bead directly above this longer bead. Obviously, it would look nice with a round bead or a different shape, and you can also make a longer earring with a few different bead designs up there. And now I'm going to finish this bit off so we can hook it onto the ear hook. So again, we'll get your round nose pliers. I'm just leaving a bit of a space in between the bead and where I'm going to start turning. And I'll hook it over. I've gone quite close to the edge of my pliers. This is just to keep it nice and small, but you can make a bigger loop by going further up if that's what you want to do. But I'm going to keep it quite nice and small. And then I've crossed it over, so it's sort of crossing at a kind of 90-degree angle. And then I'm going to go round once, twice, and now it's facing backwards. And now that I've done that, I'm going to just cut off the excess that I don't need. Firstly, I'm just going to straighten it up so that it doesn't get in the way. There we are. And then I'm going to use my flat pliers to squeeze the end in. So I hope you can see that okay. And now all I need to do is straighten it up a bit, make sure it's all sitting all right. Take one of my ear wires and pop it on. This time I'm going to show you how to make a slightly narrower ear wire. So I'm going to also go a little bit further up the pliers so you can just see the difference if you have a wider hook at the bottom. So again, just have both the wires together. This is 2 inches again, and turn them around your round nose pliers. And I've got a slightly bigger hook, and I'm going to hold them together and use a ever so slightly narrower pen, and I am going to push it over the top again. So you can see that it's just made an ever so slightly smaller design. They need a bit of straightening up, so I can use my flat nose pliers to do that. And I've left the back much longer, but I don't really want to have them quite that long. So again, I'm going to cut the end off. Using my cutters, and I'm going to, just like before, bend the end up, and if it's a bit sharp, again, take your sandpaper and give it, you can do them one at a time, but I'm being lazy and doing them at the same time, and just make sure that it's ear friendly. And those are a slightly smaller pair of ear wires, and again, you can just squeeze them. But you can experiment with the different shapes. This one, as you can see, I used a really very narrow pen or pencil. I can't remember what it was. So that gives a really long and thin effect. I prefer to have it a bit rounder. I also want to show you this alternative version, which will have the small faceted bead hanging down below, in case you prefer that. So I will again make a little head pin, and I'm going to use my flat nose pliers just to turn up the end. And then I'm going to add my bead to that. Obviously I've cut more wire than I need, considerably more, but that doesn't matter. Bend it around your pliers. Hopefully you can see that okay. So I've bent it all the way around, and then again cross it over the top and wrap it round at least 360 degrees. You can see it sort of starts to make a little spiral, so if you leave a longer gap between the pliers and the bead, you can fill that up and make a sort of spiral design, but I'm going to keep mine quite short and simple. And I'm just going to snip the end off with my cutters again, squeeze it in. So there's my little dangly bead, and now we need to attach it to the turquoise drop bead. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a little hook, but I'm also going to put the bead on first. Another way of doing this is, if this is a bit complex and you've got jump rings, you can use a jump ring to connect, but I prefer to do it this way because then there's less silver and more bead, if you see what I mean. So I'm going to just use my round nose pliers to make a kind of loop, and I've got my little bead in the bottom part of the loop. Then I'm going to hold it steady, keeping the shape of the roundness of the hook at the end, and then again I've got it crossed over 90 degrees or just about 90 degrees, and I'm holding it tightly between my pliers while I turn the end around. So that's how you attach it to the next wire. This part is going to be the connector part. And then I'm going to use my cutters to snip it, just covering it with my thumb so that it doesn't fly anywhere. So there's my little bead hanging from what is at the moment just a boring looking wire. But of course, if you're making the sun design, you can then add the sun. Or if you're making this second version of the drops, which is what I'm doing at the moment, pop your drop on. And then, as before, make a loop at the top, cross it over 90 degrees, and then turn it round a couple of times. Snip off the excess with your cutters. So now I've got my little loop at the top there, and I just need to attach it to my ear wire. I've already opened it using my flat nose pliers. Add my little bead on, or my 2 beads on, and then fold it closed so that it's not going to go anywhere. And there's the other version with the bead at the bottom, so it just depends on how long you want your earrings, and of course you can add more or less as well. I advise making them the same. So I'm going to make the little sun earrings now, and I'm going to start by adding my little pink bead. So as before, I'm going to make the end usable by giving it a little head, although it's going to be at the bottom, so it's sort of more like a tail. Oh, it doesn't want to go. Ooh, squeeze there. So again, using the flat pliers, I turn it round and then I do it again. This is partly a nice design, but it's also because the holes of these beads are quite thick, so to use the thin wire it's better to you have to turn it around at least twice, and like I've said before, you can make a nice spiral and keep going if you want to. And now I'm going to make the top of it, so get my round nose pliers again, make a kind of loop around the top like that, and then I'm going to hold it steady because I'm going to fold it over, so fold it again as before, 90 degrees or thereabouts, go round at least 360 degrees. I'll do it one more time so you can see the beginnings of a spiral forming there. And then use my cutters to cut it off and tuck in the end. I'm going to tuck in the end now because otherwise if I do them all at the end I might actually forget. And that's what it looks like. You can see that it's a little bit different with the extra wire, the extra layer of wire at the top there, and it does give quite a nice finish. But now we're going to attach it to the main bead. So very similarly, we will take our wire. I've got about 1 centimetre sticking through on the other side of my round nose pliers, and I'm just going to fold it round so the wire is pointing back on itself, making a loop, and I'm going to pop our new little bead on the end of it before I carry on, like this. Oops. Then holding it steady using the pliers. Again, fold it over 90 degrees, and I'm going to go round a couple of times to make sure that it's secure. It's got a bit bent there, still fine though. And I'm going to use my wire cutters to cut the little excess bit off, but again you could keep going and wrapping it round. So it's not quite straight, so I'm going to, when I tuck it in, tuck the end in, I'm just going to straighten the wire up. The advantage of using these sorts of wires is it's very forgiving and you can correct things as you go. That looks good. And now add my little indigo sun. so it sits on quite nicely. This is called a connector when you're making a loop on either side to connect two things together. And I'm going to make my loop at the top. So I've gone over my pliers, back and around, and now wrapping between the pliers and the bead. There we are. And now I'm going to snip the excess wire off. There we are, and I can put it on one of my new ear wires. There we are. So I've opened it to the side and now I'm moving it back into the middle again so that it's nice and secure, and voila, there is my new sun earring ready to wear. The other way of doing it is to kind of do it the other way around. So with these earrings I've got the main larger bead at the bottom and a smaller one on top. So I'm going to just quickly show you that as well, using that in case that design is something you want to try. So I'm going to make my head pin again by folding the end around. Oh dear. There we are. Really squeezing it in. Didn't want to do it at first. Then round it goes. Keep going round. I'll do one more, or half a turn. Partly because they do have big holes, and partly just because it does look quite nice, especially with the sun. And then perhaps I'll straighten it first. I'll use my wires to straighten it up. There we are. My pliers, I mean. So this time I'm going to put the sun on. There it is. And then I'm going to put the pink bead on top. Really just to show you what it would look like if that was something that was tempting you. And then curl it round as before. So really in making these earrings, you're really doing the same techniques over and over again, but in slightly different ways with slightly different things and at slightly different times. So again, there, I put it on the ear wire, so I don't know, you can just decide which one you prefer and do that one. And here, the drop ones, again, you can see the different style. One is a bit more kind of swingy and dangly, and the other one's a bit more solid, but it's completely up to you what design you use.